Okay, everyone can see my screen, okay?
You're good. Lord.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so good morning, everyone, again. Happy New Year. Welcome to our first office hours of the year. Uh, Thanks for joining today. Today, we're going to be talking about rain gauge tracking, both from an inspector's point of view, also project engineer, and even construction managers and resident engineers and their role with rain gauge tracking on your project. And additionally, at the very end, we'll have some time to answer any questions that you may have about rain gauges, rain gauge tracking, the process, the best practices, but then also we'll have questions for anything e-construction related. If you're having issues with your payment or if you're having issues with any other module or software for e-construction, please feel free to let us know. You can queue up the question for the end as we will have some time at the end to answer those questions. I see that Keith joined. Hi, Keith, and anybody else from any other BMP auditor, please feel free to jump in and give feedback or provide any clarifications if needed. But this is just a process, that we've created through your guidance previously and also what's going on projects already. So we've just outlined the best practices. So obviously, Keith and anybody else feel free to reach in if needed. Okay. So first to get started, what we're going to talk about today, documenting rainfall on HVAC construction projects. All of your projects should have some sort of rain gauge tracker, right? And at the very bottom of this article, we'll go over just some tips from various field people who have installed rain gauges. Just some tips that, when you're installing these rain gauges, that we do not want them to obviously be tampered with and are a representative of the actual working area, right? What's the point of getting those readings if they're not a good representative area of where you're actually working, right? It's not a good representation, so therefore the data is then useless. So also make sure that's level to ground, 12 to 24 inches above ground. Those are the main things. And obviously we can get further into the specific details, but those are the main points of when, you're initially installing these rain gauges on your project. So getting back to the top, we should all be keeping track of this on our projects, calling out the specs here under section 209. For projects with NPDE as permit for construction activities, right? We need to keep track of this. And based off of last year's COCOA review, we audited this and we noticed on a lot of your projects that that there was no formal way of tracking this that you guys were consistently doing, right? And not to say that was for all projects, but just to say generally across all of the projects, we weren't seeing the rain gauge reports all of the time and consistently in one place. So that's why, moving towards we're about to go into the next COCOA review, putting this out so that we can all be on the same page and kind of be consistent with this. Because in the past, I know there have been many different types of ways that you would do this. I know there was a form previously, like a fillable PDF form. Now there is Headlight has had this rain gauge report for a few years now available to you guys on all your projects. So want to be sure that we're all on the same page and consistent. So just to reiterate the spec, for construction areas discharging into nutrient or sediment inspired waters, inspect, prepare written report, make repairs to BMPs. Obviously, those the typical maintenance of BMPs. And then also we have the weekly report that you did and that you do and we talked about in previous office hours. talked about the best practices for both the weekly and also the monthly compliance reports in ACC. So if you're unsure, please be sure to go watch that recording and or read the best practices that we have available for the weekly and monthly compliance inspection reports. Now, we mentioned in those reports the rain events, and this is what we're going to get at today. So this is the gauge that will trigger a rain event inspection, right? Rain event inspection and or, obviously, depicting on your project the weather conditions, because that determines whether the day or whether your project is workable or not, right? And that's obviously super important when it comes to your daily diaries, when it comes to contract time, and if contractors argue that they aren't able to work that day or they called a rain day for whatever reason, you got to make sure that in your diaries you have proof of the weather conditions, and this rain gauge is one way of proving or disproving something when it comes to the weather conditions out in the field. So it's important that we obviously depict regular weather conditions, but also this is also very important as well. So within 24 hours of rainfall of 0.25 inch or greater. So that's the big benchmark, right? The quarter inch. Previously in the 2005 standard specs, it was 0.5 inches. Now changed per the reoccurring standard special provisions. It is quarter inch or greater, which occurs in a 24-hour period. And then finally, when existing erosion control measures are damaged, right? So that's obviously just also typical maintenance. So that's from the spec. We pulled that directly from the HDOT specifications. Now, want to go into a summary of the process that we'll be going over today. And it's quite simple, but there's a few steps that you'll need to go through and some potential options depending on the type of equipment that you have. So first is to review rain gauge data daily. So obviously it's within a 24-hour period, right? So we're reviewing the rain gauge levels for the previous days, for the previous 24 hours. So review rain gauge data daily, and it says website or automated email. I will get into that a little bit later. Enter the daily weather and rain events in headlights. So obviously we're not just entering in rain events in headlight. We should be entering in a weather observation every single day. Whether it's sunny or whether it's rainy, we need a weather observation so that we can remember and dictate what the weather was on that day. We can depict what the weather was actually that day. Next is to maintain weather documentation in ACC for BMP records. So this is important because obviously not all BMP auditors have access to headlight. So what we need to do is once we have that approved report, which I will show you, we need to be sure that we're taking that report from headlight, downloading it as a PDF, and then inputting it into ACC files in a particular folder that we will show you. And that folder, the BMP auditors will have access to it so that when they do their checks, they'll be able to go and find your information. And when we do our COCUA checks, we'll be able to find that information as well. Sorry, I'm letting people in as they come in. Grant, if you could continue to let them in as they come in. Okay. So data collection and headlight entries. So tracking weather conditions throughout the day. Enter any rain gauge readings. Okay. This is even if it's not over a quarter inch. So obviously we want to track it regardless. So if it's 0 inches, we still track it. So there still should be a weather spreadsheet observation within headlight that says 0 inches. And or, you can track it through the journal entry, the automated weather journal entry. You can do that. I've seen a lot of people do that. And then obviously you have the spreadsheet entry, which correlates to the monthly rain gauge report. So I would say best practice is to do both. So here are some examples. So if we go through two various different types, because previously there was website data, right? The Hopewell link that you had previously. So where, you would have a graph and then you would go through the previous day, and then you would read the graph and see if it hit over the benchmark of 0.25. If it did, obviously it triggered a rain event inspection. So then you would need to, perform an inspection and obviously write that down in your diaries. Additionally, even if it wasn't over 0.25, you still needed to record the highest level over the previous 24 hours. So you would go in, find the highest level, and you would go and create a diary observation within Headlight. Secondly, and for most projects now, you should be having automated emails from Lycor. And this is when you should get an email and it will give you it'll give you an export of something that looks like this. And then this is where you'll take your reading. So obviously, you'll take the highest one within the last 24 hours. And that would be your general reading for the day. And if it ever hit over a 1/4 inch, and that's when obviously it would trigger the rain event. So 2 different ways, right? And this is how it was previously done. This is how it should be done now, right? Through Lycor and automated emails. So again, if you're not getting these automated emails, then you can still do it through the Hopal link, the older way that we used to read it. Moving forward, so now that we've read the data, we've got the data, and we've inputted the data entry into Headlight. Now, what do we do from there? Now, this is where I think some people get confused, and where some people, especially last year during the Kukuas, were not following this step. So the next step is to, let's say it is the end of the month, right? It is the first day of the next month. I'm doing a rain gauge report for December, and we're in early January. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Headlight Reports tab. I'm going to go and change the filter to rain gauge report form type. I'm going to, as we put here in this name convention, rain gauge report, and then put the month and year. So that's going to be the title. It's going to be the report type, and then I'm going to hit create. Once I hit create, then it's going to create a report that looks like this. And then what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to utilize the filter feature within Headlight to filter for the days that you want. So for my example, it would be from December 1st all the way to December 31st, right? So I would want to filter for all of that. And then I'm going to select the, once I have this, I would click select all, and I'd be able to select all of those observations, and then I'd be able to add it to the report. This is very similar to the diary report, right? There's many options to create a diary, right? You could do it from the My Daily button, where it just takes every observation that you created for that day. Or what you can do is you can create a report there's 3 options. You can create a report and then retroactively add all of the observations, or you can just merely go to the journal or spreadsheets and just filter for a bunch of different observations, click onto it, and then click add a report. There's many different ways that you can create a report and add observations to it, but what I'm getting at here is that it's very similar. It's essentially the same mechanism. Now, it's just getting those spreadsheet weather observations, and if you have any journal observations that depict weather as well, you can add that here as well. But what we're mainly concerned with for this rain gauge report in Headlight is the spreadsheet weather tab. So it's going to be under spreadsheets, and then it's going to be under weather. And this is the main thing that we're concerned with for the rain gauge report. But obviously, any other additional context, you can add journal reports of, this weather observation here. And this is automated, not something that you can edit it, but it's something that's automated and will just automatically generate based off of the information that Headlight has. But then obviously you want to also cross-check with the rain gauge levels as well. So getting back to the best practice, you create a report, you add all of the observations to the report, and then it'll show up with, all of your observations here within that diary. And then what's going to happen is, so once you're able to see that report and you're able to see all of your entries, you can download the PDF at first, and this will be blank. This highlighted area will be blank. And you'll be able to see all of the entries that you put and you compiled for this month. Now, once it's ready and once you accurately see all of your observations that you want to depict in this report, then what you're going to do is similar to any other form in Headlight. You're going to click the submit button here. You can click it on report details, or what you'll be able to do is you'll be able to click the bottom right hand corner, click submit, and then once that happens, so if you are an inspector, right, you will click submit, and then it'll get sent to your engineer, and then your engineer will be able to approve or reject this report. Now, if you're a field engineer and you're doing these rain gauge reports on your own, you'll be able to submit it, and then you'll also have the option to approve or reject it after. Now, for example, I had Grant submit one as the inspector who created all of these observations and created this report. And once he submitted it, it will stamp his name here and then stamp the date. The moment I go in and approve it, it will stamp my name also with the date. And then once it's approved, the form will be locked out, and then the only option that you'll have is to download the PDF. And once you download the PDF, it's going to look like this. This is what it'll look like with only one rain gauge observation. Obviously, this is not how it should look. It should be every single day of the month, right? So you should be tracking. It should be a long list of all of the days that you're tracking. And then obviously at the bottom here, it'll show any diary or journal entries that you have as well to provide additional context. But like I said before, what we're concerned with here is the weather spreadsheet observations that specifically read out the rain gauge level. Any questions so far on the Headlight process before we move into what to do after that? Okay. Now, the ACC portion is pretty simple. Now, once you have that monthly rain gauge report and it's approved, right? We want the approved rain gauge reports. What we'll do is we'll download the PDF, download it to your local hard drive, and then you're going to go into your project in ACC, go under Files, and there's two notes, okay? There's two sides of things. Originally, if your project is new, you'll have this project files and it'll kind of look like the folder structure will look like this. And where we want you to upload this approved rain gauge report is under the approved rain gauge reports under G2, under construction phase, under general. Obviously, it's under the general folder, but then if your project was created previously, your folder structure will look a little bit different. It'll look like the older folder structure that we had, and where you'll find the BMPs is under construction management, and it'll be under B13. So, or I think it's B or A13. It's under one of those, and for that one, that is where the BMP auditors will have access to. So either way, the way it's set up for both folder structures is under G2 is where you have approved rain gauge reports, and that is where this is the folder that the BMP auditors will have access to. Similarly, for the older file structure, the BMP auditors will have access to that A13 folder as well, and then you'll be able to upload those rain gauge reports, and the BMP auditors will have access there to review and reference if needed. So that's the end of the process. I wanted to briefly mention that this was, as I mentioned at the beginning of this training, this is something that was checked for at last year's COCUA review. And it was highlighted under this criteria right here under F. Yeah, see, it says under A13. So similarly, this year we'll be doing the same check. So wanted to provide this to provide some clarity and so that we can provide consistency. If we haven't been doing this on our projects, then we need to get started on doing that and then filing it accordingly. Now, some of you may be doing it a different way, but at least this will provide consistency and where we'll be able to go in for Bakul's, go in for any of Keith's people and the BNP auditors that will need access to this type of information. This will all be accessible to the people that will need the information. And this information, like I said at the very beginning, is not only important to just BNP auditors, but it's important, you know, if contractors are arguing for unworkable days later on, you're able to track, you know, the data, the rainfall data for that day, for that month, and also what's in the diary. And so that'll help you in any sort of situation or argument that you would have potentially with the contractor. So that's it for this post. I will post this link in the chat here. Okay. And as my chat pulls up, I'm going to post it in the link. Oh, I'm sorry, Marvin. I have not been keeping track of the comments. Does the monthly rain gauge report record project diaries approved, draft, or submitted, but not approved? So is your question, Marvin, does it essentially tie to if the daily diaries have been approved or rejected? Is that your question?
Well, sometimes the inspector, some may be, well, say if they have it in draft, but it's not, you know, reviewable to be approved,
Yes.
then it stays in draft mode. Sometimes
Yes.
it's submitted, but there's corrections they have to make on the diaries. So
yes,
the
understood.
engineer may not approve it yet. And then there's the one that's approved. In most cases, I'm thinking the monthly gauge, rain gauge report will show only the approved project diaries. Is that correct? Or can it show
No, it
all
can
of the
show all.
data
No.
regardless?
So yeah, now I'm understanding your question. Thank you for clarifying. Yes. So it will show, it'll be able to show even if it's in draft. So that's why whoever's compiling the report at the end of the month, you know, by then, hopefully all of those diaries have been approved already, right? But if they're not, then you are able to add an unapproved one to the report. But then as an engineer, when I'm doing my check, that's something that I'm just going to look for, right? And I'm not going to approve it unless, you know, all of the observations are accurately depicting what was out in the field, and thus the diary would be approved for that. So that would be, so to answer your question, Marvin, yes, you can add ones that are still in draft. So at the engineer level, when we're reviewing this, we just have to make sure that, you know, all of it aligns with our diaries and the approved information that we want displayed.
I was just wondering because like when you put the range of dates and then you select all, yeah, I wasn't sure, but like I would have
you
select
can, well, you can do
gaps
that,
in
but then you
between.
can also, what you can do also is you can filter for approved reports too. So if you only want things that are approved, then you can filter for that as well. So there's many different ways you can filter and you can add to a report. We just have to make sure that when we're creating that report or when we're reviewing it, that we, you know, do the necessary checks and stuff like that. So, and then your other question was, can Headlight include an automated rain gauge? You know, that's something we could do in the future. That's something that's not integrated right now. Definitely a possibility in the future, Marvin, but can't do it now. What I would suggest maybe is to just add it as an attachment to one of your journal entries, or you can add it as a file in journals. So if you would like that information there, then, you know, obviously you could do that. And or what you could do is you could create a folder in ACC and have it as, you know, the Lightcore report folder in ACC, where the auditors will also be able to see that information as well. So you can do it both ways. But yes, that's a good point. Any other questions? Okay, well, I'm going to stop the recording for this training.